It took far too long to make this film. Um, it just took over 4 years to get to this point. This film actually, though, is one of those things that's over 20 years in the making in some ways. I read The Right Stuff when I was in high school, and if you've ever read the book or seen the movie, Pancho factors in the story of the early space age, and especially the story of the breaking of the sound barrier. And I just remember being riveted by that book and really remembering this iconic character, Pancho Barnes, who's in the book, because it didn't make any sense to me. How could a woman who was apparently in her 50s have this rapport with all these tough test pilots? It wasn't really explained at all in the book, and that was a question that lingered for many years. And I happened to get an opportunity to write an article about Pancho. This is in about 2002, and I was looking for material, hoping to find photographs and other material, and I had been told repeatedly that things like that did not exist because there had been this famous fire at the Happy Bottom Riding Club that had just destroyed everything, and I was told it's just hopeless. And lo and behold, I got the name of somebody, Dr. Lou D'Elia, who's in the film, and they said he has acquired some of Pancho's stuff. Go see him. And he graciously invited me into his house. He took out one of those boxes that you store your taxes in, and he popped the top of it off. And I just remember he pulled out this, the top photograph was Pancho standing next to Jimmy Doolittle, the Medal of Honor winner and a speed pilot in his day, and then a photograph of Pancho with Amelia Earhart at this 1929 Powder Puff Derby, and then Pancho's pilot's license. And I was holding on to her pilot's license, looking at, it says Orville Wright, and I said, why am I touching this, and this is not in the Smithsonian? I mean, it was such a mystery, and at the end of looking through this box, Dr. D'Elia said, Nick, I see you really get what this stuff is. Do you have some extra time today? And I said, well, sure. What do you mean? And he said, well, I have, 94 other boxes like this one. So anyway, it just kind of fell into my lap. Now, we saw that stuff, and I immediately knew there was a film in there somewhere, but the story that developed over time completely changed, I think, from what I ever imagined and probably from what Amanda ever imagined. So that's it in a nutshell where this came from. Yes, in the back. Yeah, that's right. So after this huge, brouhaha with the Air Force kicking out all these people that live next to the base and having this war with Pancho, they decided that building a gigantic atomic-powered plane that needed a 30-mile runway to take off was maybe a little crazy.
To say nothing of having a nuclear reactor in an airplane. Yeah, and
But sooner or later, it was clear, even, I think, before they came up with that plan, that she was going to have to leave. And I think because, it was at that time, and it is now, a very secret facility. So, sooner or later, she had people flying in there all the time, and they would, take a little detour over the Air Force Base's airspace. And she was constantly getting in trouble for things like that. So sooner or later, she would have had to change what she was doing. But those ruins are still there, and they're preserved now. That they're never going to be leveled. But once a year they have this barbecue where people do get to visit them.
Well, once a year. They didn't open it this year, and it sort of depends. I think that, but I don't think the PR person for the Air Force this year was on top of it. I think they will, but it became increasingly difficult for us to have access to it.
Yeah, there's nothing like being at Edwards, because I went out there at one point to see these ruins, and the person, my tour guide, made a phone call, and it was very prolonged. And I said, well, you know, Ray, what are you talking to? You know, what's up? And he says, well, I'm just checking with the range safety officer in case there's any live missile firings, and we don't want them to hit the car, you know. So.
Well, well, as a young boy, she shared custody of him. But as he grew up, they had a lot of fights. It was a tempestuous relationship. But he did establish his own airfield up there. But he was killed. Fortunately, after she died, he was killed in an air accident as well.
Yeah, if I could speak to that for a second, you know, when she was a mother at that era, that was a time when you would be raised by your nanny. And I think that's what she did. You know, she went off to Mexico and left her son with a nanny. And after she lost everything and her marriage was, you know, had deteriorated to nothing, at that point, that's when she did sort of pick up things with her son. And he did move out with her to that ranch. And she did bring him up. So they'd had a long separation, but I think, you know, they had a mutual respect later on in life.
Yeah, I mean, that foreman, we loved that foreman. Unfortunately, he has since died, but that foreman told us stories of when he and Billy were both 8 or 10 or something like that. No, he was older because they met when he was 15. When he was in his 15, 16, he took Billy down to her house in Laguna Hills, and they used to practice target shooting in the fireplace. I mean, you know, it was an unusual upbringing.
Yes. Well, so you're talking about the mystery ship that's featured in the movie, and this is an incredible plane. It was one of 5 built, and it was really the Ferrari of the skies. At the time she owned it, it was the fastest plane you could buy, and it had just won the Thompson Trophy just months before she purchased it. And I mean, it's kind of shocking that she had this aircraft. And she did win it back, and then unfortunately she passed away, and then her son was working on it, and then he unfortunately was killed, and it ended up getting sold, and unfortunately it now is in the United Kingdom. And the good news is, though, that it has been completely restored, and I recently was sent a photograph of it, and we hope that it's going to come back to the United States, at least on tour, maybe sometime even next year. But that plane survives, and it should really be, you know, in the Smithsonian, you know, parked near that Lockheed Vega that you see at night in the museum, right?
How did she die? Well, she had a very sad ending, and we decided that we wanted to end on her because the Air Force was so much her life, and because aviation was really her life. We did not follow her to her very last days, and she got cancer in their very last days. She was up in this little house, this little cabin, really, and she died really desolate. It was a very sad death. She died alone.